realizing that actually no one knows everything, and I think you are more of a liability, particularly as a junior lawyer, if you purport to be otherwise. If you purport to know it all, you are a risk. I think leaning into the fact that you are a junior, leaning into the fact that you don't know as much as the people around you and who you're reporting to, and therefore having this curiosity mindset is what I think really can really assist. If you're showing up as a junior and you're eager to learn, that comes across very clearly to your supervisors and your co-workers. People want, generally speaking, they want to help out more than they don't. Get a sense that when you're setting your own goals, that you don't have to have sort of one. There's no one model. It's really making sure that whatever you want to achieve, realizing that you can do that.
Kia ora te whānau, tēnā koutou katoa, nō mai haere mai or nō mai hoki mai. Welcome back to the What a Lawyer podcast. This is a show where we interview accomplished lawyers across Aotearoa looking to share their skills, stories and legislative insights for our curious minds or emerging lawyers looking to learn from those that have been there and done that. I'm your host, Sam Lindsay, an agency director and search partner at Chisholm Clark, and I privately help lawyers navigate their careers both nationally and internationally. And through this podcast, bring you stories and conversations that you can learn from and apply today. What a Lawyer, it's Erica Burke.
Hi Sam, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Erica. Very well indeed. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Yeah, it's a sunny day. Beautiful.
Can't
Beautiful
complain.
day for a chat.
Yes, indeed. So what's up? How's things? What have you been up to lately?
Things are sort of full noise at the moment, but in a very good way. So I went out on my own nearly a year ago. It's coming up to my 1 year barrister anniversary.
Congratulations.
And so this week's been, thank you. This week has been a combination of client meetings, court applications, in-person attendances, kind of a lot of back and forth with the other side, the other side, and it's a bit of a mixture of everything. So yeah.
Yep. Cool. Well, appreciate that, and well done again. And thank you so much for giving up your time to come and join us on the show today. Much appreciated. We're very, very lucky to have you and draw from your experience. And we're going to be discussing a main topic today, that of self-awareness as a practicing lawyer. Erica, let's begin by just learning a little bit more about you. Can you please start with what drew you into the law initially? Perhaps a quick walkthrough of your career to date and what you still enjoy about practicing.
Sure. So I have always specialised in family law. I started doing family law at Auckland University, which is where I did my entire law degree. And towards the end of the degree, you can obviously start taking on electives. And I started doing family law papers, really enjoyed it, wanted to sort of test the theory and test whether I would actually enjoy it in practice. So my career trajectory has really been, I want to find out more about, insert topic XYZ, and just go for it. And then the plan evolves from there. So I reached out to a few firms that I researched who specialised or had family law teams, essentially created a bit of a clerkship with them. And so that was McVeigh Fleming. They're in Auckland, a number of offices now, but I was in the Auckland City office. And I stayed there for about 4 to 5 years. So I finished my degree while working part-time. And then I loved family law, and I treated it, particularly in the early days, as a bit of a question to myself sort of constantly of, do I still enjoy this? Am I still learning? If and when I get to the point where the answer to those questions is no, then I'll look to do something else. And I'm still doing that now. So the answer has not, hasn't changed. So I started at private practice and moved firms when I was about 4 years PQE to another firm in the city, Line, which had a specialist family team as well. And then last year I made the decision to join the bar. So I've always specialised in family law. I think what has drawn me to it has stayed consistent, in that I enjoy the one thing that I think turns a lot of people away from it, which is that emotional component. And that emotional complexity that's a part of every single file that comes across your desk. And family law is also really varied. There's a lot of different topics, a lot of different issues that you can come across. So the breadth of the area has also has continued to kind of challenge and keep you interested, really.
Cool. Well, thanks very much, Erica. For the main element of our conversation today, we're going to get into your definition of what self-awareness of a practicing lawyer actually looks like, how to position yourself as a junior lawyer. We've got managing your personal brand and work delivery, some common stereotypes, work-life balance, some examples from your current experience, some mistakes that juniors might make, and some practical tools and takeaways from the conversation. So there's a bit to get through there. So let's start with the spine of this topic. What does self-awareness as a practicing lawyer, what does that mean to you?
I think it's twofold for me. So self-awareness as a lawyer is about knowing yourself and seeing yourself, clearly in a situation, and also seeing how you land on others, how you're sort of received by others. I think when you're a practicing lawyer, there's always ample opportunity to grow, to evolve, to shift, to pivot in terms of what you're actually doing for your job, but also how you show up in that role, and where you want to lean into or steer away from. So I think to do that properly and to have real agency over your career, you need to have that baseline of self-awareness. What actually, it's an overused phrase, but what gets you out of bed in the morning kind of only takes you so far. It's really, what is interesting to you? What are your perceived challenges? Who do you like to work with? What kind of energy do you like to be around? All those questions, which is another way of really saying getting to know yourself.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned just before, taking agency, and the next point that we've got to get through is, how to position yourself as a junior lawyer. There's a few sub points here, but what I'd like to get into is this part now. So how do you position yourself as a junior lawyer?
I think as a junior lawyer, there's inevitably you figure things out for yourself, and you by the time you finish your degree, and you've more often than not, spent many years in a row at university, and you're then, you graduate, you're at the top at that point, and you then, if you're going into particularly private practice, you're going into an environment where you're at the bottom of the ladder again. And so I think there is a tendency to feel like you know nothing, and therefore I think a common association with that is that you can't really offer much, or you're really just there for the grunt work. You are there to learn a lot more than you know. That's true. But I think in terms of positioning yourself, and so my career has obviously been based at law firms, so that's what I can talk to. But this, I think, really applies even if you're working, in a company or for a barrister, for example. But really, I think leaning into the fact that you are a junior, leaning into the fact that you don't know as much as the people around you and who you're reporting to, and therefore having this curiosity mindset is what I think really can really assist. And it's been something that I think I've become a lot more aware of, particularly in the last few years. The power that comes with that. So by that I mean, if you're showing up as a junior and you're eager to learn, that comes across very clearly to your supervisors and your co-workers. People generally speaking, they want to help out more than they don't. If you are showing up with a real interest in this area, they'll probably give you more work. I've worked with some incredible juniors and intermediate solicitors over the years who have displayed that kind of approach. You want to take more time out of your day busy workload to show them and explain the context of the task that you've delegated, for example. So I think that's sort of one point. That's more holistic in terms of, I suppose, practicality as well. If you're, if you're the junior who's easier to delegate to, then that's just going to create an ongoing positive relationship. You'll get more work, you'll get more recognition, you'll get
100%. Yeah.
You get more specialized, really. And so I think being easy to delegate to means being available, obviously, showing that you're available and you're there, anticipating what the next step will be, even if you don't know the answer. So I think if you're and realizing that whoever you're, giving the document back to, giving the draft back to, realizing that they are very most likely very time poor, how can you kind of help them? So I think a lot of the time you can understandably think, if you're a junior, I have no idea what comes next, I don't know the answer. But you can think, well, we probably have to find that out then. So maybe I should go look at a case, maybe I should go look at a textbook, maybe I should go look at the legislative commentary. Then I can take back this draft document to my supervisor and say, I don't know, points 2, 3, 4, but I've had a look and I think it might be in here. That's inevitably more helpful than I have no idea. Here you go, dumping it back on your desk. Yeah,
I haven't done anything and I don't know what to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think anticipating the next step is counts for a lot, and no one expects you to know everything in terms of the material and the law. And also, I think we'll talk about this later, I think, as well, but in terms of that sense of imposter syndrome as well, realizing that actually no one knows everything. And I think you are more of a liability, particularly as a junior lawyer, if you purport to be otherwise. If you purport to know it all, you are a risk, because that can carry through to poor advice or limited advice to a client at the worst end of the scale.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that imposter syndrome keyword was one of the main things I was going to ask you about next. What could someone who perhaps has or is displaying a little bit of imposter syndrome, how might they actually get around that? But I think you've probably nailed that, just in terms of being useful and showing initiative and understanding that everyone doesn't know everything. So maybe just relax a little bit. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Relax a little bit. Yeah, easier said than done. And
I know. Yeah.
I mean, law is an innately very competitive field, right? I mean, you've come out of law school, and I remember I loved my time when I went to Auckland Uni, but I remember there were signs in the day, the law library, around exam time saying, be mindful of your notes. People would steal notes, not to use your notes, just so that you wouldn't have notes. And then you have, clerkships, and there's only limited spots, and it's a very different, and I think you'll know more about this, but a very different market now for juniors than it was when I went out. We've obviously got AI as well, which I know from speaking to some law students and junior lawyers, they're very nervous about the impact that's going to have on them. So all that to say, it's a very competitive environment anyway. And so I think with feelings of imposter syndrome, I think the first step really to try and tackle it is to realize that it's a very, I think, rational and proportionate response to the environment. You've got a very competitive environment. It's what you do with it, though. And I think if you can try and change the narrative in your head a little bit, that can help you move forward past that kind of it's a feeling of being stuck, I think, imposter syndrome gives you. And so if you think, well, there's nothing actually innately wrong with me for feeling like I, don't have the confidence to show up, or I don't know, X, Y, Z. If you realize that it's actually more about the environment, and then also the part that you can change, well, firstly, actually realizing that there is something you can do and that you can change. You're not going to be stuck in that forever. I think lean into it. If you don't feel confident about your knowledge in a certain area or your practical skills in a certain area, want to know more about that, then there's your opportunity. Who can you go to ask? Who can you shadow? What can you kind of actively do to learn more about whatever's got a bit of a chokehold on your confidence? And we'll talk more about mentors as well and your sort of wider support team, but they're invaluable, really, in terms of giving you perspective, because imposter syndrome, you will feel like the sole imposter. And a 5-minute conversation with a mentor usually can let you know that actually everyone around you probably feels the same way or has at some point.
Yeah, cool. So taking control over that situation, probably, taking agency actually is a good keyword surrounding that. And
agency.
Yeah, and so you and I have discussed that a little bit, and obviously like creating your own support services around that. What does that look like for you?
I think agency and support services, so or support systems, I mean, I think they are your backbone to a sustainable career, I think, particularly in law.
Mm.
So in terms of support systems, I mean, you can create them really, I think, from many different sources. And I think the key advice and that I would give junior lawyers, but also that I'm thinking about, for myself, that's really worked, has been to lean on people and lean on support networks from a variety of places. So the first thing you think of is who you're working with. Again, if you're in a firm, there's your colleagues, the people who are more so at your level. I think building a sense of, or being part of a team is really helpful, because often that in the trenches mentality does carry you quite far. If you're all working on big projects, or you've got late nights or difficult clients, particularly for family law, you need to have people next to you who you're talking to regularly. My advice would be to stick to make sure that you've got a mentor or someone outside of your immediate team, and ideally someone outside of your actual company or your firm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a number of places you can kind of get that support from. I think mentors in the legal profession who are more senior than you, and who are available, you can find those. You can. I honestly think LinkedIn cold calling, LinkedIn messaging people, saying, look, if you follow them, they may have posted something of interest. They might just be in an area that you're interested in the law. People love to help, and they also love to talk about themselves. So if you message and say, look, I wanted to take you out for a coffee and pick your brain,
Yeah,
I genuinely think 9 times out of 10 you'll make that happen.
very
and then
often.
You can have it very often, right? And then you've got like an informal kind of mentoring arrangement, perhaps. A shameless plug here for Auckland Women Lawyers Association. We do what's called chance coffees, which is exactly that. So you just go on the website, put your name in the pool, and you'll be matched up with someone of varying expertise, varying seniority. You're matched up. You're then left to yourselves to work out when and where you'll meet up for a coffee. It may just be one coffee, but from there you can have a regular, again, informal mentor-like. Yeah. You can have more of a structured mentoring relationship, and there are senior lawyers I know who offer that. There's also, professional coaching. That's also something that a lot of barristers I know voluntarily undertake, and that's more of a paid arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think it's important for junior lawyers to recognise that there's no cap on when you will need to talk to someone and when you'll need to get someone else's advice or input, either about your career or about a challenging file across your desk, for example. I think the other thing is looking at your non-law networks or your non-law connections. So there's you may have a sports group, you may be involved in a charity, there may be a church, there may be some other institution or group you're a part of. Those are all opportunities for you to obviously network, which we may talk about as well, but also to look at, if you've got a coach, for example, there's a lot of life skills that apply to your legal career. They don't have to come from a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. At Chisholm Clark, I spend a lot of time talking with lawyers about their careers. Sometimes they're unhappy, sometimes they're just curious, sometimes they're well and truly looking for a change. If you genuinely love your role and you have a great mixture of work type, people, balance, culture, then that's fantastic. You probably don't need us. But if you've been wondering whether this country, this firm, this role, even this area of law is the right fit for you, then that's where we can help. Chisholm Clark is a legal search firm built here in New Zealand specifically for lawyers. We take a private, thoughtful approach, getting to know you both as a person and as a professional, so that we can connect you with the right opportunities that genuinely fit, including those on the open market and off market, not just what you hear about or see on the shelf. Whether you're actively looking or just exploring, we offer a confidential, no pressure way to understand your options, from roles and salaries and insights and people and genuine career direction. Because a legal career should feel sustainable and not overwhelming, sometimes the best next step is just finding the right fit and starting up. If you're ready for a chat or just want to know what's out there, head along to chisholmclark.co.nz and reach out today for a private discussion on your terms. And now, back to the conversation. And so when we talk about mentors, quite often one of the exercises that you can go through is setting goals and, perhaps painting a picture for your career, or, a bit of a map, so to speak. But I often think these things don't need to be too rigid, more just like something to work towards. What's your experience with, setting goals and creating a bit of a map to that extent?
I'd agree. I think they don't need to be too rigid, because it's almost setting yourself up for failure in a way if it doesn't happen by an arbitrary time frame. The difference is, I suppose, if you're trying to look towards a promotion at a firm, they may have more of a timeline.
Yeah, of course.
But I think in terms of your own goal setting, for me, I've never really had anything like a 5-year plan that's really rigid. I think you, as a guide and a starting point, really, is getting to know your values. I ended up doing a really helpful, it was more of a life coach, or a few life coach sessions with a colleague years back who was training to be a life coach. So I was her guinea pig, and it was a really, really helpful exercise, because I went through, what are my values? What is something particular about me that's my sort of driving force? And I mentioned one of them before. It's curiosity and knowledge. It's learning, not just about law, but in general. So I think if you do that exercise, I'm sure there is a number of ways you could use Claude or ChatGPT to help you figure them out as well. You don't have to go through a life coach, but come up with a relatively condensed list of what is it about you that you want to kind of propel forward. What is it about you that's your motivation intrinsically? That will help you when you come inevitably to any kind of juncture in your career path. So that helped me a lot. And then also focusing on sort of your immediate next, say, 6 months to a year, kind of thinking where you'd like to end up. But I would refrain from adding arbitrary dates or deadlines, because you need to, or if you do put them in there, be prepared to revisit them as you go, because careers are very rarely linear, despite the fact that I think you and I have, I think, talked about this before as well. The professional legal industry can be quite linear. It's a very straightforward career path if you want to choose it. It's clerkship, graduate, and you go up through the ranks to partner. It's laid out for you if you'd like that option. But I think what also helped me over the years is just, you can read interviews with various lawyers or people who've done interesting things with their law degrees. You can read sort of profiles, interviews, things like that. And you see that actually it's a lot of people who've ended up where they are through, changes in their life or their life circumstances. They had to move somewhere, or something happened that interrupted the general kind of flow. Or they had some, opportunity that came out of nowhere because they knew someone who reached out. So again, I think building your networks early is really, really helpful. And you get a sense that when you're setting your own goals, that you don't have to have sort of one. There's no one model. It's really, making sure that whatever you want to achieve, realizing that you can do that. There's no one else who's going to.
Yep, nice. Let's talk about delivery and brand management, especially when we're talking about this wider idea of self-awareness as a practicing lawyer. You have to be aware of, what your personal brand is doing and, managing that, so to speak. So we've got a couple of subpoints here around technical skills, client skills, team and, personal relationships, and also supervise. I think the supervisor part's probably one of the bits that needs a wee bit of airtime. But let's talk about this in general. What is that, when we talk about delivery and brand management as a practicing lawyer, let's talk about that.
Well, I think you have a brand, you have a reputation, whether you like that or not. It may not be a widely recognized or huge brand, particularly if you're more junior, but you have the opportunity to build that. And I think you have quite, again, coming back to that sense of agency, you've got quite a lot of agency in terms of what that looks like. So I think your brand is really just another way of saying your reputation and what people associate with you and what they think of. It is, you'll have your thoughts on this as well, in particular. But I think it is, to a large extent, is about who you know, and what they then think of you. So if you, and that comes back to sort of where you want to go in your career. If people are aware of you, or if you get referred work, often that's because of who you are and what people think about you. People want to work with people that they like and respect. So probably coming back to the fundamentals, I think having a respectful reputation and making sure that you're associated with the good things, reliability, consistency. If you're a junior, it's the little things that compound, right? It's showing up, it's doing a good job, it's being eager, it's being interested, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of adult learning these days is by osmosis, being beside someone, being actively listening to what someone's doing. You can pick up bits and bobs. I like that, or I didn't like that. You craft your own after that, I think. And I think that probably leans right into this next point around self-awareness as a junior for what your supervisor really, really needs from you. And, I suppose a lot of what we've just talked about probably relays straight back into that. But is there anything else you can give around the supervisor lens?
Yeah, so I think we've talked about obviously how to be easy, I think, to sort of delegate to. I think what I've heard from a lot of sort of partners actually, or senior lawyers, is how is that concept of feedback as well. So if you're a junior, you're more often than not, you're hungry for feedback. You really, rightfully so, you want to know how you're going. Again, I think coming from university, you frequently get feedback. If you think about it, you frequently get your test results, your exam results, whatever it might be. You know how you're going. When you join, again, if you're just joining a firm, for example, you may have a one-on-one arrangement with a supervisor or the partner already. But if you don't, I think I would again come back to that sense of agency. You can ask for what you think you need.
Yeah.
Go get it. The worst that someone will say is no. Maybe the worst they'll say is that you're being annoying, but it's better to be annoying than to just sit there in silence.
Yeah, nice. Now let's talk about stereotypes. Understanding taking agency, is on you essentially, but there is always going to be a layer or an element of, a stereotype. Male versus female, lawyer, capability, availability. Historically, is it, more heavily weighted towards one side than the other? I don't know if there's any one correct answer here, but I think that's why this topic is so gritty. So
yeah,
let's get into this. Where would you like to start with stereotypes?
There's so much to talk about this topic. I think probably to being aware of them, for one, and the grim reality is that they exist.
They do, yeah.
I'm more able and more well versed to talk about the stereotypes and expectations on women in the profession. And I think there's, again, another opportunity here to plug the women's law associations across the country, the Auckland Women's Law Association and the women's law groups at university are great places to start if you are a woman lawyer entering into the profession, or if you already have, for that kind of support.
Yeah. In terms of leadership, you mentioned obviously there's some stats around women making their way through the ranks, perhaps a little bit less than men. When it comes to leadership positions, obviously making your way through there is pretty critical so that you can end up in a position where you can influence juniors. But there seems to be a slight gap or a slight discrepancy between female and male leaders in law firms. I feel like that's changed a lot recently, perhaps not so much, back in the day, but in terms of leadership now and the stereotypes surrounding it, especially with regard to, juniors displaying self-awareness, what do they need to look for?
I think as a junior, realizing it's that idea of that there's not one way of doing something. There's not one person or type of person that is equated with authority or associated with leadership necessarily. And I think if you're in an environment where there is, you need to be looking elsewhere. And that's easier said than done. I completely appreciate that. But I think as well, that recognition that if you don't at the moment, if you're very junior, knowing that you will be able to offer something in terms of a place that, in a place of leadership, if that's where you want to end up, by being who you are, your life experience will inevitably be able to be, utilised and can make you a leader when you get to that stage. You don't have to necessarily kind of mimic or mirror the people in the room who are leaders. You can learn from them. You can learn what resonates with you and what doesn't.
Let's talk about, we've so far talked a lot about what to do, especially with regard to self-awareness. What about some common mistakes or some things what juniors should not do or try and avoid as they're coming up through the ranks?
I would probably start with, pretending like you know it all, or feeling like you have to sort of mask your confusion, or mask a lack of knowledge, or confusion about something. I think there's a real tendency to do that, and again, if it keeps happening, and you feel the push to do that, or you see other people doing it around you, it very well may be the environment that you're in, and being aware of that will help you navigate what you do. Do you stay with trying to put in place some kind of systems or change of how you approach certain situations, or do you look elsewhere? So probably not feeling like you have to pretend to be an expert yet, because again, if you're a junior, no one will expect you to be. It's realizing who can you ask questions to, of. I think also treating any kind of feedback overly personally. If it's about your work, if it's edits that have been made to a document, don't feel like that's the end of the world. Don't feel like the fact that your document's full of track changes means you should resign immediately and never come back. It's actually really helpful. Look at any kind of
learning
feedback
opportunity,
information,
isn't it?
Yeah, look at it all like that.
Yeah,
because it is. People don't have to give you feedback.
No, yeah.
Often people giving you that feedback and people spending time on you, even if it's critical, is actually a sign that they want you to stick around and improve, which is a positive thing. And probably also just a sense of impatience. I am quite an impatient person myself, so it's a bit there's a bit of irony here, but being overly impatient, thinking that things will happen overnight, thinking that you'll excel in your career in rapid time, does almost set yourself up for failure, for disappointment, and just doesn't leave space for growth. Growth inevitably will include a sense of failure or mistakes, and I think leaving some fat in the system, and in your plan, will actually make it stronger.
Yep.
And probably the last thing I think was sitting back and waiting. Waiting to be told what the next thing to do is, waiting to be told how you're doing in terms of that feedback, being proactive, talk to people, ask people things, keep your own notebook, or keep your own document on your computer of skills you want to learn, tips you've picked up. Having if you're using OneNote or whatever you're using, having a separate tab for tips, that you'll overhear that people tell you, rather than sort of waiting to be kind of delivered that information.
Yep, absolutely. Very helpful stuff. Thanks, Erica. Now, the last part of our conversation is summarizing everything that we've discussed in a concise manner as much as you can.
Yeah.
But essentially what we're looking for, some practical tools and takeaways, and that could actually apply across the various levels, juniors, intermediates, and even seniors at your level now. With regard to this topic of self-awareness, what can we give to take away today that, some lawyers could implement tomorrow?
So I think starting with the juniors, it will be building that habit of being self-aware and building that habit of reflection now. So I think starting off with maybe it's weekly self-reflection, 20 minutes even, looking at what you've learned, summarising what's challenging. And then I think also if you're working already in a firm, if you haven't already, setting up regular meetings, if you can, with a supervisor. And LinkedIn stalk one person, and message them and say, can I take you out for a coffee and pick your brain? I think if you're more intermediate as well, it's really being more aware of your brand as it is. So you might want to start to join those associations, start to join boards, for example, and be aware of your sort of position in the market almost. So it may be that you want to talk to a recruiter and see what's out there, or have a think about kind of where you're heading if you haven't already. And also this normally happens by nature of being in that intermediate position, but starting to supervise and starting to mentor be a mentor yourself can be really helpful. And obviously it gives back to the juniors. You can do that outside your firm. There's Auckland University mentoring programs that I've been involved with as well. And there'll be, I presume, countless others throughout the country.
Yeah.
Seniors, I think, have a real responsibility, and there's a real obligation, I think, that can come with your position of seniority and your law degree in general. So I think we talked about that there's no kind of cap or end to learning. I think looking into professional coaching is a really, really helpful idea that I see a lot of colleagues going through. And be open as well to learning from your junior colleagues and from junior law students or clerks. They will have different ways of looking at a situation, and so did you as a junior, and there is no one way of doing things. And I think that information exchange can go both ways, and realizing that you are representing more than you may be aware of. So lead with respect and normalize behavior that you think should be modeled.
Very helpful. Thanks, Erica. Well, that's all we do have time for this episode of the What a Lawyer podcast. Thank you so much to our audience, our media team, and our sponsors. And a quick request to please follow the show or give us a rating on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, just to help us spread the word and reach more curious minds. Thank you so much, Erica Burke, for your time, your expertise, your generosity in sharing your story and your expertise with us. I'm sure there's been a lot in here for some of these junior lawyers to take away today. Just a personal thank you as well. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and fleshing out this topic a little bit more. I think self-awareness is massive these days, not only in law, in life generally, really. So thank you so much for sharing that curiosity and then just giving us all of those really good detailed points all the way throughout this conversation. So thank you so much. Once again, What a Lawyer. That was Erica Burke.